Holsworth of the Virginia Certified County Supervisors Program. Now, it is my pleasure to announce, the Go Green program, winners of the Go Green program. Please come forward. Well, we changed this. I'm sorry. We've changed this. First, would like to ask Josh Burnett of Mosley Architects, the sponsor of the Go Green Awards, to come forward and present the awards.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning.
Good morning.
The Green Government Challenge is a friendly competition designed to encourage implementation of practical actions to improve the energy efficiency and the welfare of government facilities and programs. The Go Green Virginia initiative has several components, among them a scorecard that through its implementation is designed to encourage policies and actions that reduce emissions produced by local governments and the communities they serve. VACo, in cooperation with VML, has worked to develop a challenging, county-friendly scorecard that VACo members use to achieve their certification. After amassing at least 100 of a possible 300 points in the following categories, governments will earn certification as a green government. Those categories include community involvement, energy efficiency, renewable energy, procurement, land use and transportation, environmental stewardship, water stewardship, waste management, employee initiatives, resiliency, and my favorite course in school, extra credit. So we'd like to congratulate the following certified green governments for 2018. And as Mr. President said, please come up when we call your name to receive your award. Albemarle County.
The big boy one.
Yeah.
Yes.
This is all you.
Very much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Great. Arlington.
Here comes Pat.
Okay. Chester, Arlington County.
Yeah,
Yep.
sorry.
There she is.
She was here. I'm a substitute, sorry.
Congratulations. Chesterfield County. Chesterfield County. Henrico County. Henrico County. Louisa County. Louisa County.
Yeah, coming up.
Hurry up.
Montgomery County. I like your enthusiasm. Right here. Congratulations. Thank you. Prince George County. And last but not least, York County. York County. Congratulations to all of our winners.
we got yours.
I don't know where Sheila is, but I'll take it.
You say you're messing up the shot.
We get in the back row there.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Congratulations. Yes, sir. Congratulations.
Things change and I've got to find my place. Okay. Next, we invite Dr. Mike Chandler to tell us about the Virginia County Certification Supervisors Program and recognize the graduates of the 2018 class. But before Mike speaks, I'd like to recognize Dr. Martha Walters with this resolution. Ms. Walters?
Martha, the board adopted a resolution in honor of your service and your work with the, can everybody hear me? Everybody hear me? In honor of your work and service with VACo and county supervisors for the Certified Supervisors Program. We're going to miss you. I know that you're going into retirement, and but hopefully we can bring you back and help out the Virginia Certified Supervisors Program sometime. But the resolution is being framed as we speak, and we don't have it here yet.
That's okay.
We just didn't get it here in
So
time.
honored.
So, but the board just adopted this this resolution on Sunday at the board meeting. But I really want to thank you.
Here, here.
Y'all are amazing. First of all, thank you very much. Very quickly, I know Gage has got me on a timer somewhere. It has been a true joy to work with VACo, to work with each one of the counties and the supervisors that you sent to the Certified Supervisor Program. I have learned so much from each of you. You have let me ask you questions and challenge your thinking a little bit, and you have challenged me. And I am so grateful. And I want to tell you something, Dean. So here's the rule of thumb. The rule of thumb is that after retirement, which is going to come faster than I'm thinking, like just in the next 4 months, and but I've promised people that if the project is interesting, if it has a start date and an end date, I might be interested. And especially when it's working with people that I love, and your team are amazing. So great people of integrity and honor. So we're not here about me, but I cannot wait to tell my grown children, because you know they don't ever think their mom does anything. Yes, yes. She was. Thank you. Right back at you. So my friends, Mike is not somewhere. I have called him. I think he's thinking it starts at 10:30. So when he comes in, we're all going to applaud him. So first of all, you know that this program is built on the huge vast of knowledge of Mike Chandler. You know that. And it's built on experience of everyone that enters into the program. So we are here today to honor 6 of your highly committed elected officials. They have invested themselves in over 1,800 hours of training, not individually, but as a group. And that includes inside the classroom, plus all the work they do outside the classroom. Although, some people tend to exaggerate outside the classroom work. Just saying. But we bring them in and we want to hear what they've learned from their reading. We review their writing, we talk about their thinking, we question, and we debate. And then we take the impact of this knowledge back to our communities. and we try to make those communities a better place to be. So before we recognize our 6 graduates, Mike, who's just entered, there he is. Thank you, Mike. We all know that Mike was somewhere talking to someone about county government. Yes, Michael? And so before we... They're on Martha time.
They're on Martha time. One time I'm early, I'm still late.
That's all right, we got you covered. So, Mike, we're going to recognize our 6 graduates in just a moment, and these 6 graduates, we're so proud of them, and as you come up, there's one thing we're going to ask of you. One word. Now, I know for some of you, Tom, not calling names, that's difficult, but one word that signifies what your takeaway is from these 5 classes you've invested yourself.
You got my promise, Mark. One word.
One word, Tom.
Well, thank you, Martha. I apologize for having you to pinch hit. Once again, I was not able to be present last year to recognize our large graduating class of 2017. And I'm running a little late, obviously, for 2018. I imagine Martha did provide you with an overview. I think many of you are aware that VACo, in partnership with Cooperative Extension Service at Virginia Tech, has for the last 16 years sponsored the Virginia Certified County Supervisors program. The genesis of the program was rather simple, and it continues to drive us in terms of our focus today, and that is the rather simple proposition that effective governance, consequential governance, governance that makes a difference in the lives of the citizens you serve, should be a matter of choice rather than a matter of chance. And the 5 courses that are identified and offered through this program resolve to provide the participants, the students in the class, with the foundation in order to achieve consequential governance at the local level, to indeed practice the premise of good governance is a choice rather than a matter of chance. The 5 courses center upon budgeting, community planning, leadership, making a governance difference through understanding your powers, duties, and responsibilities, and then the focus on how we get the job done through collaborative governance at the local level. Each course features, or module features, 3 distinct learning components. There's an opening classroom session, a day-long session, followed by 8 weeks of home study. Martha has indicated that means book reading, completing a series of true-false questions, as well as short essays. And then you have a concluding 1-day classroom session. So that's rather intense, and that's done 5 times over the 5 courses. 3 courses a year are offered, and thus it's about an 18-month program for those who go through the certification program. We are quite honored to identify those persons. We have 6 that are with us today in terms of having concluded all components of the program. And I will call them by name. I believe 5 of our 6 graduates are present. Robbie McGraw, who is a member of the board in Carroll County, cannot be with us due to his wife's illness that precludes his attendance today. We're going to begin, I think, in roughly alphabetical order. We're very pleased to recognize and call forth Norman Dill. Norman is a member of the Board of Supervisors in Albemarle County. Okay, and Norman.
Well, I would just say that the courses not only help him be a much better supervisor and become the vice chair, but helped me in all my civic life, family, business. They're general lessons that aren't just applicable to the Board of Supervisors. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Norman. Adam Kidd, member of the Board of Supervisors in Bland County. Adam?
It's kind of hard to put into one word the impact of this course, and of course, politicians, we're not going to say just one word. But if I had to narrow it down, it would be transformative, the impact that this program has had on my position and how I carry out the duties of a county supervisor. So thank you both for everything.
Thank you. In the aggregate, each student, each honoree, each graduate has given, we estimate, roughly 100 hours in terms of their personal time to complete the courses and do all that's expected of them, and to be active participants in the classroom experience. And that's a considerable investment, and it should not be viewed as just a matter of showing up, if you will. And this is an active, learn by doing course of instruction, and each individual finding that time while being an effective supervisor, having a life, having their own businesses, having employment themselves, is a testimony to their drive, determination, and enthusiasm for wanting to learn. And we acknowledge that and we thank them for that. Robbie McGraw. Robbie is chair, I believe, memory serves, now at Carroll County for the Carroll County Board of Supervisors. His wife was diagnosed about a year ago with stage 4 bladder cancer. They spent a lot of time of late at Duke, and that's where they are today. So Robbie's in our thoughts and our prayers. A wonderful individual, a person that has epitomized, I think, what this course is about in terms of, as he said, coming, I don't know a whole lot, and I'm not sure I can add much to it, but I think his colleagues, classroom colleagues, would concur that Robbie brought a great deal to the classroom, and we can only hope that the Duke physicians, with the power of God operating through them, will address and resolve the issues that are facing Robbie, his wife, and his family. So Robbie McGraw from Carroll County, please. Chris McDonald with VACo, our second VACo graduate. He has completed his course. It's great having Chris in the class since he's an attorney. And say, Chris, am I saying things right? And he said, it took me aside a few times.
As you know, I'm neither a supervisor, a local elected official, or county administrator, deputy administrator. So for me, understanding and learning more about the daily realities and challenges and triumphs that you all experience was, in one word, illuminating. So thank you.
And Tom Sayer. Tom, a member of the board from Warren County.
One word, Tom.
Martha knows me too well. I'll keep this very brief. I was thinking ahead of time, as Jerry and I were thinking what we were going to say. I also want to think, one is networking. I see some of our fellow certified people who went through it, and the networking is huge. I enjoy knowing all these people around the states, brothers and sisters, that now I get to know personally. Secondly, I wanted to say what would be one word, and that would be love, L-O-V-E. You know, if we don't have love, if we don't understand why we're in this and all this divisiveness that we have, and I'm bringing this in through what I thought was one of the most important things that I went through was the adaptive leadership. How do you adapt to the things that happen to you? And I've had something pretty intense happen to me while I've been on this, and I've had to adapt my leadership to this incident that's occurred to me that I don't want to say publicly. But love, and without love, you're just a noisy gong. Thank you very much.
And our last graduate, in my way of alphabetical order, is a remarkable individual, as are all of his colleagues on the stage this morning. Jerry Townsend from Prince Edward County. Stalwart, not only participant, but engaged in the collective learning, and just brought a lot to the course. And Gary, we appreciate greatly your accomplishment. He's a very busy man.
Good morning. First, I'd like to thank God for allowing me this opportunity to have completed the certification program. And also, I like to recognize my wife for being so supportive, our county administrator, Mr. Wade Bartlett, and my fellow supervisors, but especially one supervisor, Dr. Odessa Pride, who encouraged me to enroll in this program. So one word, gratifying.
And on Jerry's note, and I had thought about that, not realizing that I would be late when I got here, but I do see Odessa Pride. We do have people who have concluded the course of study in terms of graduating from this program, Odessa, Bill. Those who are either currently enrolled or have completed the course of study, please stand if you'd be so kind to do so. Wonderful. I think we were at 77 graduates. Which people say, that's not a very big number over 16 years. Well, it takes a year and a half to conclude the program, but actually 77 is not too bad. We're inching up, and we hope that there's desire on the part of those who maybe have not given thought to participating in the program to sign up and take a course and see if it is something of value for you. The schedule for courses in 2019 on the website for VACo. The next class will be the budgeting course, and that will start on, I believe it's March 17. We always generally meet in Charlottesville because it's central for the membership from across the state, and then our concluding session is the training center at VACo. So thank you very much. And Mr. President, I'm sorry for being late, but congratulations to you.
Thank you. Now it's time to discuss the CAIS election, which was perhaps one of the most anticipated midterm elections in recent memory. Dr. Bob Holsworth is no stranger to our annual conference. Bob has spoke last year and also in 2014 and 2011. We pick another exciting election to bring him back. Bob is one of the leading principal analysts in Virginia. His comments on Virginia and national politics have appeared in the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, the Washington Post, and in newspapers throughout the nation. The author of 5 books and numerous articles on public policy and American politics, he was the founding director of both the Center for Public Policy and the Wilder School of Government and Public Affairs at VCU. Bob is currently a managing principal in DecideSmart, a firm that provides analysts and planning assistance to agencies, local governments, nonprofits, and private sector companies with governmental interest. Bob received his PhD from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. We welcome Dr. Bob Holsworth.
Thank you. Great. Thanks so much. I think I'm going to come down and just join everybody down here. And can I be heard on every side of the room? Great. So what I'm going to try to do is to give an analysis of what occurred on last Tuesday. But to get there, I'm just going to give a very brief overview that I like to give about the changes that have occurred in Virginia politics over the last 30, 40 years since I've been watching it. And the easiest way that I always do this, that I find it most comprehensible, is just to talk about rural ex-urban jurisdictions, urban jurisdictions, and suburban jurisdictions. So 40 years ago, when I first started looking at Virginia, and you looked at rural Virginia, it was really split between Republicans and Democrats. It was almost 50-50. The Democrats were primarily conservative Democrats, but it was almost a 50-50 split. Today, if you looked at most of the rural Virginia vote in statewide elections, what would it be? Yeah, it would be heavily Republican, with the exception of some jurisdictions where there are significant minority populations. Greensville, Essex, Brunswick. But by and large, rural Virginia, like rural America, has gone into the Republican camp. In fact, Corey Stewart carried most jurisdictions in Virginia last Tuesday. He lost by 15 points, but he carried 81 jurisdictions there. So that's, not surprising. And in the 2016 election, Donald Trump did extraordinarily well throughout rural Virginia, like he did throughout rural America. So that's point one. Urban Virginia, the urban cities, 40 years ago they were Democratic. What are they today? Yeah, they're even more Democratic. I think Corey Stewart got about 15% of the vote in Richmond, almost nothing. So they've remained strongly Democratic. Probably the big change that's occurred in Virginia, besides the rural change, is suburban Virginia. When I first started looking at Virginia, when I first came and started looking at politics in 1978 and whatever, people talked about the People's Republics of Arlington and Alexandria. Fairfax County was the bellwether county. That was a county that could go either way. And most of the other suburban counties were what? They were Republican. And what has happened, particularly over the last 20 years, that's changed dramatically. Let me give you an example. In 1996 and 1997, when Bob Dole ran for president against Bill Clinton, and when Jim Gilmore won the governorship against Don Beyer, the places in Virginia that gave the Republicans their largest margin of votes, here are the places, in terms of total vote, in terms of margin of vote. You had Chesterfield County. Used to always give Republicans 30,000 vote margin. Hanover County. Number 3 was Virginia Beach, with maybe I think 2, Hanover 3. Henrico County was 4. These were the suburban counties that Republicans ran up large margins in. 20 years later, in these elections, or the 2017 gubernatorial election that we just saw, Ralph Northam won the 10 largest jurisdictions in Virginia. Won every single one of them. Tim Kaine did the same thing last week. And so that's the huge challenge that Republicans now have, is this change in suburban Virginia. So if we take a look at this through the lens of the election that occurred last Tuesday with Tim Kaine and Corey Stewart, we can see this. As I said, Corey Stewart won the majority of jurisdictions in Virginia. However, he didn't win any of the large jurisdictions in Virginia. Here's what happened. First, I would say there was a huge turnout for a midterm election. From what I can see right now, it was about 59–60% of registered voters in Virginia turned out for a midterm election. I think the last midterm election, 43% people turned out. So people are engaged in politics in an extraordinary way right now in America, and certainly here in Virginia. You have to go back to 1994 in that midterm election to see a turnout that was as high. And that turnout was driven by a particular election. Remember Oliver North, Chuck Robb, Marshall Coleman, even Doug Wilder was in the race for a while. That was a national Senate race that drove that turnout. And that had a higher turnout. But we haven't had any turnout resembling that in Virginia midterm for 25 years. And in fact, prior to 1996, we automatically purged voters from the rolls. So that actually led to a higher turnout because there were fewer voters on the rolls. We don't do that automatically in the same way that we used to 25 years ago. So in any case, huge turnout. Corey Stewart, the place where he got his largest margin of votes was Bedford County. He won Bedford County by about 16,000 votes. And then there were 3 counties that he won by about 12,000 votes. Goes from 11-9 to 12-3. Augusta, Hanover, and Rockingham. But his largest margin of votes was 16,000 in Bedford County. I can't have anybody from Fairfax answer this question, but how much do you think Tim Kaine won Fairfax County by? A lot. What's a lot?
200,000.
What?
200,000.
That's a great guess. It was 211,000 votes he won Fairfax County by. He won Arlington by 71,000, and he won the city of Richmond by 61,000. So that's the challenge that's for the Republicans. If your best county, if you're winning by 15,000 or 16,000, the other side's winning by 200. Even if you win 81 jurisdictions, it's tough to make up, yeah.
And the Republicans used to win Fairfax.
Bob McDonnell won Fairfax in 2009. It used to be, as I said, it was the county that determined which way it was going to go. So that's the challenge. And, the Stewart campaign was not a good campaign. I don't think he could have beat Tim Kaine under any circumstance in this environment this year. But you would have thought he would have run as being a county supervisor, chair of the Board of Supervisors. Here's the good things we did in Prince William County. Didn't do that. Wound up losing his own county by 52,000 votes. So, I don't want to say anything, Marty. But that's a challenge for the party if you can't even hold your home base on that front. But in any case, that was the situation, and the reality was, why has this suburban vote changed? What's happened in Virginia that's changed the suburban vote? And it's been a process for 20 years. So the first issue there is simply demographic change. The suburbs look differently today than they did 20 years ago. In terms of the ethnic and racial makeup, it's very changed. Chesterfield County, which used to give Republicans 30,000 votes, was 75, 80% white. The last census, it was 65%, and it's probably kicked down a couple of notches since then. Henrico County changed dramatically. So you've had that. Secondly, you've had people moving in, the move-ins. They're not moving into Virginia typically from Oklahoma, Arkansas, Kansas. That's not where the majority of people are coming from. Where are they coming from? They come from the Northeast, they come from the Midwest, they come from places where the politics are more competitive and sometimes where Democrats do a lot better. So you have that going on as well. And then thirdly, what we've seen recently, particularly among highly educated women with college degrees and above, they have moved significantly toward the Democratic Party. Finally, I have to say in Virginia, part of the suburban issue is what I'd have to say is a negative Trump effect. And what I mean by that is that Donald Trump is very popular, still popular in most of rural areas in this country. Probably ticked down a little bit in this election. We saw that in some places. But things that got him elected nationally aren't things that work in Virginia suburbs. What did Donald Trump say he was going to do to Washington? Drain the swamp. How well do you think that plays in Fairfax County? I was giving a talk to Republican office holders, Republican members of the legislature, they told me that is a swamp. It's not going to work. And that's posed a problem for Republican office holders about our Republican candidates. How do you, particularly in these suburban areas, how do you react to this? Do you embrace him? Do you give him a bear hug? Do you distance yourself? And it's a problem because he has a lot of supporters still. So you can't kind of just say, I don't, not there. And they haven't figured that out yet. And we saw that both in the General Assembly races last year, where 15 Democrats picked up 15 seats. We saw it this year in the elections I'm going to describe. And we're even seeing it a little bit in local elections. Chesterfield County had a special election for Commonwealth Attorney. And the person who won this special election was a Democrat who campaigned on criminal justice reform, that we were putting too many people in jail. And he campaigned against sort of what I would call a very traditional law enforcement person with a very high, great reputation in Chesterfield County. And the Democrat won. So you never can tell what's happening in these suburban areas. Is it going to filter down into local elections as well? It could, because it filtered down last year into the General Assembly races. And I'm going to have a little bit of advice about that on that front. But so that's kind of what's happened in suburban Virginia that's changed the dynamic. So I think everyone thought Tim Kaine was going to win. No one thought that Corey Stewart was really going to win. The Republican Party nationally wasn't taking Virginia seriously in the Senate races because they were going to try to hold on to those 9 seats they had. Then their second priority were the 10 seats that Democrats held in states that Donald Trump won. And Virginia was going to be way down the list. So, the Republicans were basically said to whoever the candidate in Virginia, you're on your own. They were hoping that somebody would be on their own who could spend $20 million of their own money. Maybe like Carly Fiorina, but she decided not to do it. And so Stewart really had no support from outside the state to be able to be competitive in that race. So that was his challenge. So then we come to the congressional races, 11 congressional seats. We started off last week, 7 Republicans, 4 Democrats. We've ended 7 Democrats, 4 Republicans. 4 Republican seats that's still there. Morgan Griffith got 65% of the vote in Southwest, won very easily there. Bob Goodlatte's seat, Ben Klein, former delegate, he won with 60% of the vote. Some people say that was a little down from what Goodlatte might win by, but that's still pretty comfortable margin. Rob Whitman, Northern Neck through Hanover, he won with 55% of the vote. I think he's a potential gubernatorial candidate for the Republican Party, whether he can get the nomination or not, but I think he's the kind of person who would like to run for governor. He was a supervisor. He was member of the House of Delegates. He worked in state government for 20 years. I have a feeling that he might seriously consider a gubernatorial run in 2021 there. So Whitman run, and then a new for Tom Garrett's seat, Denver Riggleman beat Leslie Coburn in Albemarle, Charlottesville, and the surround, that rural area that goes all the way up to Fauquier County. And he won with about 53.5% of the vote, which is probably a little less than some people thought he might have got at the beginning. Somewhere about 3 weeks out in the campaign, the New York Times did a poll, said it was even. I just thought that was never going to happen, but what occurred was that a lot of money, then national money, came into the race with television ads, and Riggleman won handily, but perhaps not by as much as some people thought might happen. So those are the 4 Republican seats. The Democrats had 4 incumbents running, and they just coasted. Donald McEachin, Bobby Scott, he had essentially no opposition, and then Don Beyer and Jerry Connolly up in Northern Virginia won very easily. So that made for 3 competitive races, people thought. The first was Barbara Comstock in Northern Virginia versus Jennifer Wexton, a state senator. And my sense was that this race was almost determined before it started by the national environment. That I have a lot of respect for Barbara Comstock. I think she may be another candidate for governor on the Republican side, is a potential. She's a great politician in many ways, but in that district this year in Northern Virginia, very, very difficult to overcome that political environment where the Democrats are just so active right now and so energetic. And Wexton won very, very easily. I wasn't very surprised by that. The second district that was very competitive was the second congressional district in Hampton Roads. That's Virginia Beach, the Eastern Shore, part of Norfolk, and that is Scott Taylor versus Elaine Luria. And that district always looked like it would be pretty competitive for this reason. Donald Trump carried it in 2016. Ralph Northam carried it in 2017. And Scott Taylor is a good candidate on the Republican side. Former Navy SEAL, very good in the room, engaged person. And over time, he had been supportive of Donald Trump on some issues, but distanced himself from Donald Trump on other issues, which he thought weren't great for his district. And the Democrats nominated, I thought, a superb candidate in Elaine Luria. Because what they did is they nominated a candidate who was great for that district. A Democrat who had served 20 years in the military. And so what you saw there was a candidate which in that part of the state, that military experience is very important. And the Democrats managed to nominate a candidate who on one hand could capture some of the energy that we saw from women throughout Virginia and throughout the nation, and at the same time had that military experience. And I actually moderated one of their debates where I saw that a little bit in action, because Congressman Taylor was suggesting that Elaine Luria didn't have a position on the caravan, that she was really for open borders. And she turned and said, well, listen, I went to the Naval Academy. I served my country for 20 years in the Navy, and I was in a command post for 3 or 4 years. She said, I don't think anyone should question whether I care about the security of the United States. And it was a very kind of powerful moment there. The challenge, I think, overall that Taylor wound up having that hurt him was the accusation of electoral fraud. Because I think that's there was one poll that said it didn't matter, and I think it did. Because what occurred is that it kind of undermined in some ways one of his strongest points, was the seal, the integrity, and the like. And what had occurred was that there was a Democratic candidate who ran against Taylor in 2016 and lost. And she thought about running the Democratic primary, realized she couldn't win, and said, well, I'll run as an independent, which would have been great news for Scott Taylor. And so what occurred, however, is that she was having trouble getting signatures, and the Taylor campaign said, well, we'll help you out. Right? Nothing, you know, I can imagine that happens in politics more than once, right?
Oh, yes.
And it turned out, however, that the help was a little, they gave a little extra help. And that extra help included some forged signatures of people who had moved out of the district and things like that. The judge called it fraud, and it was people from Taylor's campaign. And ultimately, I think, in a campaign that Elaine Luria got 51% of the vote, that was the deciding factor. That he couldn't shake the taint with enough voters there. So, I mean, that was a, so that happened. And then the third competitive race was in the Richmond metropolitan area, but not just the Richmond metropolitan area, because it extended beyond that, was Abigail Spanberger versus Dave Bratt. And I thought that race, if there was a chance for the Republicans to hold on, this was it, because of the nature of the district. The district, a lot of the national pundits said this was a suburban district. Well, it was 2/3 a suburban district, and it was 1/3 almost a rural district. They had Chesterfield County, they had Henrico County, they had most of Spotsylvania, but then it also had Nottoway, Powhatan, Orange, Culpeper, Louisa. So it went up around in a way that there were any number of counties here where Republicans were ringing up 60-65% of the vote. Since that county had been created after a court-ordered redistricting, the two Democratic candidates who had run in that race, or three of them, no one had gotten over 47.5% of the vote in that district. 45% for Hillary Clinton, 47.25% for Ralph Northam. So that race always had this challenge of actually going, of the nature of the district. And I think in that campaign, the nature of the campaign, the quality of the campaigns made a big difference. That, again, the Democrats found a great candidate in Abigail Spanberger in terms of her background, because she was a CIA operative, right? So you had, television commercials with her on the ground shooting a gun. There were two women with guns on the Democratic campaign. You had her and Luria, both had commercials where they showed you their law enforcement, military backgrounds. And what Spanberger did was put together this remarkable group of, people, especially women, who just worked like I've never seen before. That in the Richmond region, she wound up having over 3,000 volunteers, people knocking on doors, people making phone calls every night. While most of the money for both campaigns came from the outside, it was like all the national powers came in and dropped this bomb on the district, with a commercial every 2 seconds. But she herself, in the last 90 days, raised over $3 million in contributions of $2,700 or less. Just had all these folks just putting, small amounts of money into the campaign. And by contrast, Dave Bratt, who's a friend of mine, I've worked with Dave for a number of years in a nonprofit, ran a campaign that looked to me to be kind of defensive and almost a little bit scared. Because while Spanberger was out reaching out to everybody, Dave had a bad experience in a couple of town halls with protesters. And so what he did was that he ran his campaign with very few public events. He had events that were always by invitation, private events. And I didn't really understand that because I thought good politicians don't mind protesters. They kind of like them. You know, if somebody disrupts you, they look bad, not you. You know, if you can handle it, you know, it's a way of doing that. And I thought that was epitomized by what happened on the last night of the campaign. Abigail Spanberger held a meeting, you know, a rally at her, you know, they decided to hold it at her high school in Henrico County, where she went to high school. They had 2,500 people there. Both senators came, the governor came, a bunch of Congress people came, all for this rally. And they asked Dave where was he going to be? And his staff said they were going to go to a private rally in Spotsylvania at an undisclosed location. And I thought, you know, the message really is, if you're a political figure, you get out there. Right? You get out there, you know, you don't worry about who's going to be against you. You get out there for the people that are for you. And I thought if there was any message to political figures in this time around, it was authenticity counts. You know, get out there and tell people who you are, what you're trying to do for them. That's what they care about. And if you run into a few people who don't like you, so what? That's kind of the thing I think that's out there. And I think those folks did pretty well. In fact, if you look at this, one of the interesting elections that took place was in the Henrico County Board of Supervisors. They had 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans. They were in a district that Democrats were going to win at the gubernatorial level. Spanberger was going to carry it very easily. And a Republican won the county supervisor race. Easily. And how did he win it? He was a guy who was known in the county for helping out people in recreation leagues. And he went out and he talked to people. And he just went out. And the Democrat in that race relied on thinking, I'm going to win because Kane's going to win, Spanberger's going to win, and they'll get the sample ballot and everybody will put my name. But at the local level, they knew Dan Schmidt. And they said, we're going to vote for the person we know who's out there asking for our vote, who's out there trying to reach out. And so that, I thought, was kind of the message there, that there was, you know, somebody who was, again, authentic, cared about the community, was well known in the community, carried that race. So that's kind of the, you know, sort of the overall message that I take. But in the Spanberger-Bratt race, I just think that Spanberger ran a much better campaign. Because what Bratt relied on was he relied on the fact that it was a Republican-oriented district, and they only had one debate. And in that debate, Dave Bratt called Abigail Spanberger, called Nancy Pelosi's name 25 times. And at the end of the debate, she turned around and she said, my name is not Nancy Pelosi, it's Abigail Spanberger. And when in her victory speech Tuesday night, after thanking everybody, she ended it with saying, my name is Abigail Spanberger. She said, and I'm your new congresswoman. There, on that. And it was a fairly dramatic moment. But the issue there, I think, was campaign and candidates made a difference in that race. And Spanberger did extraordinarily well in Henrico and Chesterfield County. But that's the change. And it seems to me as we go forward into 2019 and beyond, that's the place, you know, the Democrats have to find a way to do better in rural areas. They're beginning to find a little bit of traction in some of these areas, not that much, by focusing on issues that people care about. Rural broadband, that I've seen here. You know, huge issue for people. Opioid crisis, jobs, those kind of matters, healthcare. The Republicans have to do better in suburban areas. They have to find a way to appeal to the suburban voter that's out there now, not simply the suburban voter of 20 years ago. That's what's going to be successful. And, certainly these trends, don't look good for Republicans so long as I think Donald Trump is in power, because Virginia is not a good state for the Republicans. With Trump as that kind of Republican doesn't work statewide. But Republicans are going to have to find a way to think through issues that enable them to be competitive, because next year we have every person in the House of Delegates in the state Senate is up for election. Every single one of them. 51-49 in the House, 21-19 in the Senate. And if the results in 2019 mirror what we saw in 17 and 18, the Democrats would gain control of both places. So the Republicans have to figure out how they're going to run these race by race in these House of Delegate races and in these Senate races if they're going to stay in power in the legislature in Virginia. So that's where we're going to be. Finally, before I just take questions, I saw your legislative priority list. It's fabulous. The one thing I would mention that I think might be coming this year in the legislative session that we've never seen before is gambling. I think, if you saw this, you saw that just a couple weeks ago there was a $250,000 contribution to Kirk Cox's PAC from a casino gambling operation that wants to be in Bristol. You have the potential Native American, casino that may be in New Kent. And all of this is surrounding this whole issue of sports betting, about whether Virginia is going to get into sports betting or not. You haven't heard a lot of traction about that yet, but if there's a kind of new issue that emerges this year in the Assembly, I think we're going to see more about casinos and betting and gambling than we ever had in Virginia before on that front. But in any case, been tremendous transformation of Virginia over 20 years. We're going to continue to see transformation. And one of the great things about it, from watching it, is that very often we can't predict it. Just when we think we have it right, something else changes to make it there. And as I said, next year, a big election. People like me love it because we have an election every year in Virginia, and I call it the political pundit full employment policy. Okay. If I have time for a couple questions, if anybody would like one. Who would like to break the ice? Yes.
Thank you. Phyllis Randall, Chair at Large, Loudoun County Board of Supervisors. Oh, I'm sorry.
And Kane carried it by about, what, 58,000 or something?
He did, and Ms. Wexton carried Loudoun itself by 20. So my question is this. So the fall off in local elections is so great. Usually in Loudoun, somewhere between 28 and 34, 35% turnout. Can you extrapolate these numbers that we saw on a national level, or when, in 2 years ago when the governor was on the ballot, it was a state election. This is a straight, just local election with General Assembly, but there's no statewide people on the ballot. Can you extrapolate those same numbers when you have election turnout that's going to be as low as a local election turnout tends to be?
Yeah. Here's what I think about the turnout in that. That's a great question. Let's look at the governor's race as an example of what I'm saying. That, certainly in the midterm, we had a higher midterm than ever, way higher. But the governor's race was also higher than we had recently seen. We've been seeing 40% turnout in the governor's race, or 41%. Governor's race was 49%. So I have a feeling that people are just a little more engaged in politics today. I don't know if it's true in every locality, but I think in a lot of localities it is. And for example, I've seen some of the groups that were involved, let's say in the Spanberger race in the Richmond area. They say, well, we're going into the county supervisor races next year. I don't know if they'll be successful, but I bet you that turnout is higher. I think people are more engaged right now. So I tend to believe that even at the local level, we're going to see, we may not see 30%, but we might see a bump of 10%, 15%, 20% in turnout in local elections next year. And particularly if you're in an area where there are competitive assembly races. Because those assembly races will spend money. And then if you're in that area, you're going to see that. But I just tend to think that while a lot of people saying they're fatigued by politics, they don't like, I was talking to somebody yesterday, last night I was giving a talk in Richmond, and I was talking to a CEO who said, I can't even watch it any longer. But I still think that there's not that fatigue right now. There's that energy, there's that activity, and I would expect a bump from whatever that last percentage was in 2015. I bet you it's higher in 2019 in most jurisdictions in Virginia next year. That's what I think. Yes?
When you were describing the changes, you described the movement among educated women, and then separately you described the Trump effect. Were you seeing that movement among educated women towards Democrats before Trump?
Yeah. What we typically saw with educated women was this. Well, let's talk about Trump. Trump carried white women. He did very poorly with African American women and women of color in general. But he carried white women. Typically what we had seen is this. Women with postgraduate degrees, the trend were moving in a Democratic direction. So if you take a look at Northern Virginia, I think 22% of the population has a postgraduate degree. I mean, it's just stunning. It's one of the most highly educated places in the world there. So that was sort of moving there. What I think we saw in this election was that kind of filtered down to women with college degrees. We saw the people who gave Trump a chance, kind of a percentage of them said, no thank you now. I'm opposed, and that sort of moved down. Trump does very well still with people without college degrees. That in a way, he transformed that part of the Republican base for the better. The Republicans were struggling with them. And a lot of people didn't believe it and needed some convincing, but there were a lot of, let's say, Obama-Trump voters. And they were working class people who just felt they haven't gotten a fair shake in a long time, that their economy's never moved up, they haven't had a raise. Rob Bell, the delegate once, sent me a little study that said the only people in the world who didn't get a raise over the past 20 years were the American working class. That everybody else, no matter, even in poor countries, their incomes went up, everybody's income went up. They didn't hear on that front. And so Trump still does very, very well with them. The Democrats have to find a message that works with them. But overall, I think what happened with the gender gap has just changed. There's always been two gender gaps. A gender gap with women and a gender gap with men. And in most elections in the past, Republicans might run 10, 11 points behind with women, but they might run 9 or 12 points ahead with men. Now they're running somewhat ahead with men, but they're losing with women. And I think there was a fall off among white women in this election that really hurt the Republicans there. So I think that, I don't know if that answers your question, but it's about the best I can do there. Yes?
Any ideas on who you think might be the Democratic nominee in the 2020 presidential election?
Yeah. Anybody here getting in the race? We have mayors, we need some supervisors in the race on that front. Well, there's any number of people talking about it, right? So you have people who ran last, you have Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, some people say Hillary Clinton. None of them would be good candidates, and I don't think the Democrats should nominate them. But, you never can tell. Joe Biden, who probably would have won if he was the candidate last time, but I'm not sure he has tremendous appeal to the Democratic Party activists now who are out there doing all this energy work, who are out there energizing the Democratic Party. I'm not sure if if Biden's the guy, but he would be a very serious contender. So I think you have to